Welcome back to AR Tales, aka the A.R.T podcast. I am A.R. Mirabal, and today I am joined by Skye Horn, author of the Kingdoms of Faerie series. Book one is Wings of Fate, and book four, which she has just finished writing, got to her editor on Monday. Wings of Insurgence is coming out soon. Very excited to speak to this individual. She's actually recommended by a lot of other authors that I've spoken on to this podcast, and it's a real honor to have you on. How you doing, Skye?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. It was really cool when you reached out and said somebody recommended me.
Yeah, it's actually if I can be honest, I heard your name in the first couple of episodes that I started recording. And it was one of
Oh,
those things that I thought would be a cool milestone to be able to get to that point. I was like, oh, if these people are speaking about this person, if I were to actually, speak to that person, it would kind of mean like a nice little milestone in the podcast. So I'm excited to have you just in that sense. But also I had the pleasure of doing a little bit of your reading and a little backstory too. I looked into your previous interviews that you went into like Star Wars and all the different things that you are into, and also you're wearing a Guinness shirt. I mean, sold, sold. I cannot wait for this conversation.
yeah, me too. I'm really excited about this.
Well, usually before we get everything kicking off, I usually like to turn it over to the person. Where can people find you? Shout outs to your publisher, your editor, if you want to say hi to your mom, your dog, your cat. This is the opportunity for
Okay,
that.
great. Yeah. So as you said, my name is Skye Horn. I am the author of the Kingdoms of Faerie series. I published my first debut novel back in May 2020, and I'm getting ready to publish the fourth and final one for this series. Obviously, I have other projects in the making, but you can find me on Instagram mostly when it comes to social media. That's kind of my favorite place to be. I like having, the visual rather than just the text like Twitter. So I'm at skyhorn_author. I also have a website where you can get signed copies of the books. You can find out more about me and my writing process on my blog. So that's pretty simple. It's skyhorn.com. And then you can find my books on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Book Depository, basically anywhere you can find a book. For the paperbacks, the ebooks are only on Kindle Unlimited. I'm a little bit exclusive there.
Well, that is kind of interesting. How did you get to that kind of setup? How did you like develop that? Because you just started writing. Well, I'm not going to assume that you started writing, but you started publishing this year, something that we just started talking about right before I hit record, that you released the entire, book 1 through 4 of the Kingdoms of Faerie within this 1 year, which is in itself a feat. But how did you
Insane.
go? Yeah, insane, insane. I mean, it's taken me years to get this book one, volume one, like underway. I can only imagine knocking out 4 in a year. And just did the idea also hit you within a year as well?
No, so a little backstory about me is that I actually went to school for writing. So I have a degree in
Nice.
creative writing. Um, I spent, 4 years surrounded by writers and watching other people do what I wanted to do, basically. And I guess, for a long time, I just wrote things that I didn't finish. And then this
Mhm.
past year with quarantine and with everything else going on, I was like, you know what? I'm going to finish my series. I'm going to actually, write these books and publish them. I'm going to stop making excuses. And it got done. And I don't know what I did right, but it worked out for me. And I was able to rapid release them. I started writing Kingdoms of Faerie November 2019, and
Wow.
I published it in May 2020. So a little under a year from start to finish for that. And the idea of Kingdoms of Faerie came to me in 2017. So it kind of just was, boiling up in my head for that long between 2017 and 2019. So I mentioned before we started recording that the idea was born out of a trip to Ireland because my
Mhm.
book has a lot of like the Celtic lore and everything in it. So that trip to Ireland just had me thinking about the story. And eventually I just sat down and decided I was going to write it and I was going to publish it. So that's kind of how it came to be and how I ended up doing 4 books in 1 year. It's been insane. Quarantine actually helped.
Yeah, no, I gotta say, quarantine, it was also the start of all this, and same train of thought as well, because my background is engineering, and author like writing was always something more kind of like a hobbyist. But then with quarantine and just like kind of realization that a 9 to 5 really is not as stable as you think it would be. You know, the moment that the company
Yeah,
is compromised, you're compromised. So it's like the idea of like job security is kind of like, oh, you know, what am I really getting into? And then just the whole like idea of that started trading into like, yeah, I should just, you know, get into what I like doing. Cause like, I mean,
absolutely.
I'm not this happy at work. You know what I mean? Like there's something about
I do,
writing.
absolutely.
It is just, it's my thing. I don't know what it is. I can be talking to a person about like a book I haven't even read yet. I'm not even into the genre. And the same energy. It's just like, oh yeah. I like seeing the passion of other people like in writing. That's how much I like writing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I completely understand that because I actually have a 9 to 5 job as well. I work from home now because of everything going on. But
Definitely.
yeah, it's not as satisfying as writing. Writing, I feel like I'm bringing people happiness in my books. I'm giving the story. I'm happy when I'm doing it. Like it's all good. There's no downside for me.
That's awesome. Do you feel that you got a positive kind of community feed? Well, obviously you got a positive community feedback, meaning that if other authors are already recommending to me, meaning to you, and that was back in November. So how would you say from your point of view, how was that, you know, dropping Wings of Fate and then everything that happened, you know, following that?
It's crazy because looking back to, when I published Wings of Fate, or even when I just joined social media, because I actually joined Instagram as an author back in January of 2020. So it's been a little over a year now. And I had no idea what I was doing. My first post was just like a book on my Instagram. And I was like, hey, I'm reading this book. Hi, nice to meet you, basically.
Yep.
So I had no idea what I was doing. And I self-published. So I was kind of on a learning curve anyway. So I want to say that I just kind of learned along the way and I made friends along the way. And I
Definitely.
reached out to people who were higher up than me. And I was like, hey, I'm doing this. Do you have any advice? And that really worked out for me. And I think that it's kind of just stepping out of your comfort zone and, getting ready to hear somebody say, I don't really want to give you my advice, like, or tell you that it's not, their genre or whatever. But just stepping out of that comfort zone and being able to talk to other authors and other people in the writer communities that are on Twitter and on Instagram and on Facebook sometimes, that really gave me insight to what I needed to do. So my first book was a bit of a plunge and I just kind of went for it and tried to figure it out along the way. And then the second one got easier and the third one got easier. And now here I am.
Man, I have to say that I feel like there's a lot of things that you're really singing my song about. One thing that I have kind of in my head, especially with Allegory of the End, is that I really painstakingly, almost pigheadedly, went with this first person point of view because I was just really like romanticize this idea that if you look at a story strictly from the point of view of only one character and only another character, then there's a whole bunch of nuances that from the character's point of view, they think that a certain thing happens when in reality that's not what happens in the world. Know what I mean?
Yes.
And I love the idea, but then it wasn't until I started writing uh work after and I just decided like, hey, you know what, let's play around with a narrative. And I started writing a narrative. I'm like, oh, this is way easier. Why did I even try doing all this extra work when it's like I could have done the same thing with a narrator and like even could have put, because I felt a lot of limitations too. Like I'm a huge world builder person, and like the book itself is a fantasy, a science fiction fantasy. So there were a lot of things about the world building aspect that like led me to have to do other things. Like my book has like 30 graphics in it that I needed to put in there just because it wasn't like fully, you know, thought out through the character's point of view. Because if I were to write a book about you right now, are you gonna go out the nuances of how an iPhone works, or how your TV works, or how your car turns on? No, you just say I turned on my car, and then it went, and that's it.
Right.
But a narrative would have just been so much easier. Did you get any of that type of like feeling from Wings of Fate to the book too, where it's like, oh yeah, I'm an idiot. That was way easier.
Yeah, I think that yes, the simple answer is yes. I definitely think that as we learn too, as we figure out these new things about writing, like you said, like figuring out that first person is very limited and you don't get to see, what else is going on except from that character's point of view. As we figure out things about our own writing and about our own style, I think that just kind of opens the doors. And I look back at Wings of Fate and I'm like, okay, I could have done this different, or I could have done this different. And it's in a good way though. It's not that it wasn't, a good enough book at the time. That's who I was as a writer when I first wrote it. But by the time I got to book 2, Wings of Deception, I was like, okay, I know how to do this now. So let's really dive into the depths of this, and let's figure out what this character is really feeling. And I feel like I grew a lot as a writer between each book, and I learned a lot about myself and about my characters, which I don't think I would have done if I hadn't been pushing myself to, just do it and keep going. So that is definitely what I took away from it, is just that you definitely do learn a lot along the way, and you pick up things that you didn't realize before. And that goes back to what I said about reaching out to people, is that if you have other authors in your group or in your community that can be like, hey, you did this, you might be able to do it this way next time. And I feel like that's really helpful. Just having people you can go to for critique or for help or for just reader feedback. It's a community thing for me. I love having other writers around me now, because I didn't have them during the first book. So
Well, that's awesome. And you really felt that you built that type of community, or was it more that it was you dived into that community that was already there?
so this might sound a little hot-headed, I guess, but I, I don't know if you've taken a look at my Instagram, but we did develop an Instagram page, me and a couple other writers, that's called the Writer Community. And it's basically just a platform for people that are in the process of, publishing their first book, or learning what the struggles of being an author are, self-publishing versus traditional publishing. Basically any question that you have to Google, which I'm sure there's lots
Oh
of
my
Googling
God.
with
Yeah.
self-publishing. So basically any question that you have to Google, we like to try to answer. So we did develop that, and it's grown a lot. We launched the Instagram page, I want to say about a month and a half ago, and it's already grown to over 1,000 followers. We already had a group of people that were totally into it before we started the Instagram page, and it's just getting bigger and bigger. We're going to have a podcast of our own coming out soon, and we're going to have, the website launch and all of that. So that has been motivational and inspirational, I guess, because I have all of these different people around me who will like send me messages and be all, well, I'm doing this, what do you think? Or I'm doing that, what do you think? And I've really enjoyed just getting to know so many new indie authors and self-published authors, and people that didn't know that they could publish a book but have this story building up in their head that they want to, release to the world. So that has been my favorite part of the writer community, and learning how to use Instagram and learning how to use social media for my author business, because I've gotten to meet so many amazing people. And just like this, I mean, you reached out to me on Instagram and I was like, yeah, let's do it.
No, I mean, I'm in the same boat with you as well with the social media. I didn't have any social media prior to November of 2020. It was just like,
Quick.
the need arose for like the whole like author thing, and then like I dived into it. And
Yeah, you have to. You just have to jump in.
you have to, because I'm not a social media person to begin with. I'll you know like a meme every here and while. I'm not gonna make a meme. I'm not gonna sift through memes. It's not a type of thing that I like doing. Not that I don't waste my time on my phone. Believe me, I do. But it's
Yeah,
just
we all do.
yeah, I just don't like hopping on like social media a lot. But I have to say, the bookish and like the bookstagram community and the writing community, and I was aware of that page that you're whole doing, and the whole movement really, because like I said, I'm a I cannot be more in love with like the whole community, especially with my idea of what social media was prior. And then you kind of start meeting people, and it's not like so bullshit as you would think. It's like people are actually really genuine and really like their
Yeah.
craft, and like are really into it and have the same type of passion that you do. And it really is like a beautiful thing. And and it's unreal now that, especially when I talk to my friends about it, when I like go like do check over my iPhone and check how many like hours I spent on Instagram, and it's like, oh my god, if I would have told myself this 2 years ago, that would have been
Right.
a licking, to say the
Yeah.
least.
Yeah, I'm the same way. It's funny to look back and see how much things have changed in the past year for me, because my focus has changed, and what I'm passionate about has changed. I've always been passionate about writing, but finding a community of writers has been a completely different experience, and it's been eye-opening, I think is a great word for it, because I didn't know it was there before, and now I can't imagine my life without it. So
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when you try to explain it to other people. It's like, no, 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 no. This book thing, and it's really popping. It's unreal. It's like there's a lot of really,
yeah.
especially when you do like a follow train or something like that. What you'll see is that I can't tell you how many times I'll find new accounts that were started like 3 days ago, and there'll be like five a day that will just like pop out of nowhere, just like add me or like do some type of you know community outreach or a follow train, whatever it is, and it's daily there's new accounts being made that are strictly for this community.
Yeah.
It blows me away if you would have tried to explain that to me like a year ago, you know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. I completely understand because I didn't know anything about it before a year ago either. So
Well, kind of segueing into the writing, before I asked for the inspiration of well, I know the whole thing of Ireland and all that, but more of the magic, the character development. Before we get into that, you spoke a little bit about it with your background in literature, but how did you get into writing? How did you decide to go into a writing major? Was it from the youth? Were you writing in your diaries from a young age, a journal or something like that? How did it
so
start?
I actually started in music. I
Nice.
grew up in a very musical household. My parents are both musicians, and I went to a performing arts school for high school and spent a lot of my time doing song lyrics and poems and things like that. And I think it was 11th grade, I took a creative writing class because I needed an elective or something like that. And I already knew that I loved writing lyrics and I knew I loved writing poetry and all of that. But my teacher had us doing like, short fiction or whatever, just to creative juices flowing.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with it. I was like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. Like, this is perfect. And I had really good feedback for what I was working on, especially for such a young age. And I just went with it. I stopped doing music, not like forever, but I realized that I was more passionate about the words that came behind music than I was about the actual, composing or things like that. So I applied to college and I went and got my creative writing degree. And those 4 years were incredible. I learned so much in college. It's not necessary to have a college degree to do writing, but I think that it kind of fused my passion for it
Mm.
and showed me, this is possible and I can do this. And like I said, I didn't have a lot of writers around me at the time, so it was good to be in a network of people who also were doing the same thing. Um, so yeah, a lot of my writing was born out of that creative writing class. It's funny because a few months ago, I found a book that I wrote as like a 5-year-old, and it was like a full-on story, like 10, 15 pages. And I was like, yeah, see, I knew I wanted to be a writer before any of this happened. And
What happened?
it literally was titled my first book. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. So I guess I've always wanted to be a writer, but I didn't really realize it till I was going into college and kind of started doing fiction and writing. I've been a reader my entire life. I love reading. So that, if you can't tell, I've got like a huge bookshelf behind me full of books.
Oh
But
my God, that's
yeah, that's where
awesome.
it came from.
Yeah, it's really weird because I have to say that as far as motivation, inspiration goes, I'm on the same path with you. Uh, I never really looked at literature. I mean, I was like a city kid. I never really cared about school that much when I until like high school and whatnot. But there was something about music, you know what I mean? I always did poems. I always like wrote my own like little lyrics and whatnot. But what really fueled my thing for English wasn't writing at all. It was a teacher that just like spoke highly about literature and made me think of like it was like Shakespeare at that kind of like the most like basic level of like introduction you can get to English, like the thing that everybody like can quote at least like a line from. But the way that he just like talked about it just blew my mind open, not only just like to that writing, but that you can put so much thought into writing. Because I remember at the time I thought it was like dumb. I'm like, how are you putting so much thought and like so much? We're writing like 4-page papers on a line. Like, how do you know this dude wasn't just drunk and wrote that line? How are how
He
like
probably was. He
he
probably was.
almost guaranteed, especially knowing like history. But
Yeah.
like it's one of those things that it's like, how can you think that he put so much like thought into that? and then you don't get it until you wrote it, and you're like, yeah, motherfucker, I did put all that
Yeah.
and weeks more of work than you thought I did. And it just fuels everything. Because even Stephen King, I remember the first time I ever heard of Stephen King, it was in a Family Guy skit. And I remember like it was just a dumb skit. And all I thought as I was watching is, who is Stephen King? And why are they messing up my Family Guy game right now? And then 4 or 5 years later, it's like I'm revering him like he's God. It's like, oh my God, what? He wrote how many books and how many times? Like, who is he? And they're all bestsellers. They all have movies. Who is this man?
Yeah, for sure.
No, it truly is something to aspire to. And not only aspire to, but do you think of that frequently? Like, when you think of your movies or your plots, do you think of them as like a TV show or a movie, and then you kind of like backtrack into a book?
Sometimes, yeah. I think I'm a very visual person too. So I can, some people aren't that way. They aren't where they can like picture the things happening in their head. But like I was saying with, with how the story developed, I was on a bus in Ireland and I was literally like picturing this girl running across the open green plains and thinking how cool it would be to, discover this magical land in those brilliant, beautiful,
Rolling
I don't
Hills.
know if you've been to Ireland or seen pictures of Ireland, but it's gorgeous. And it's magical. So that was born out of a vision in my head. So I think that I don't know that I think of it as like a TV show or a movie, but I definitely imagine, what's happening in my book, and it's very real in my head, which is probably just makes me crazy, but whatever. So yeah, I think that it's part of my writing process, especially to picture and then write, and then picture again and then write again.
If I could be honest, I actually are you into history?
A little bit. I'm not very good at it, but yes.
That is my answer, because I'm horrible at history. Anytime I talk to a person that actually knows history, I get everything wrong. But I like but I like the idea of it a lot, And magic, like I didn't grow up reading Harry Potter. I grew up reading Percy Jackson, you know what I mean? I grew up reading just like sci-fi. I wasn't really into like the whole magic thing. But I have to say, as an adult, I'm getting more into it from the historical side, especially with Ireland, right? So like Irish historically have been getting the shaft for like ever. If it wasn't England trying to conquer them, it was Spain, it was somebody trying to get at their land, and they have been fighting literally. I think they signed treaty with England in 1994. That's when they finished.
Yeah, it
fighting.
wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, that's when they finished. Can you imagine? Like longest, like long, like you know what I mean? It is the perfect analogy of like how they are as people. You gotta love it. It is nonstop, right? And for good reason. And especially when you think of like something of like magic, that like a lot of like magic mythos comes from that area. I think it makes sense when you have people that are like subjugated to like such a degree that they feel like they have like nothing else to turn to, that maybe they turn into like another route. Same way that like voodoo developed in like Haiti after like the conquest of like all those people and like all the different things. Like, did you ever get into like for the research of your books, did you ever get into like the historical kind of like the reality of what magic could be?
Yeah. So my books are very loosely, I'm going to say, because I twisted the lore based on Celtic lore and Celtic myth and all the stories behind fairies that is in the Irish history. So the main idea of my book is that there's a goddess called Anya, and she's one of the Irish goddesses, one of the Celtic goddesses, and she's supposedly the queen of the fairies. So she has her own like town in Ireland. And when I was doing research, I came across the Hill of Naganya, which is it's just a basic green hillside, basically, but it's where they would do rituals in the old days, and they would have like witchcraft rituals, and the druids would come and gather around in that area. It's got like the stone circles and things like that you see a lot of in history. So I, dug into that research because I'm like, that's cool. I want to know more about that. And she was the queen of the fairies. So the story idea was born out of her being the queen of the fairies under the hill. So she disappeared into the hill and took her fairy people with her. And that's why they're not part of Ireland anymore. And so that is where my main character disappears to. And she goes and, finds out that she's from this world too, and she didn't know that. So a lot of it is born out of myth and lore. I've also got the goddess Morrigan, who's the goddess of death in Celtic lore, and she is my main antagonist in the first book. So a lot of the story was, pulled from that, and then my main character just kind of twisted it to her own thing, and it became kind of a medieval land full of magic and fairies and goddesses that are all from the Irish histories. So yes, I do have the history in there. I twisted it a little to my own liking, but it's myth, so it's not real anyway.
Man, that is just so awesome. Because as I said, up until recently, magic was never something that was I've been into, but I have been really kind of digging that idea that of like basically what I said before, of like people brought to a point that they have to turn to things. I mean, imagine being rolled up on by people that have armor that you didn't even know existed on Earth.
Yeah.
You're walking around with spears and armadillo skin, whatever's around you. You're throwing around nets. You got some fish, whatever. You got nothing, and these guys roll up on you with cannons and armor and swords and artillery. Like, what are you gonna do? Any idea?
Exactly.
And more so, especially with everything you're talking about, they believe in gods, plural. So they were monotheistic. Imagine you have people coming to you. It's like, oh, no. Listen, what you were believing in, you're like 12 little, whatever. We got one, and you gotta convert to him, son. I don't care. Our God is about love, and you're gonna die if you don't believe in him.
Right. So basically all European history.
Yeah. And I think that is a really interesting start for like magic, but that is a very grim, admittedly very grim side of magic. What was your point of view of magic? Like, how did you want to specifically go about it?
So it's funny because a lot of my magic is based in elements, so based in nature. Each different type of fae has an access to an element, so they can use water, they can use air, they can use fire, earth. But the cool thing is that with Morrigan, the goddess of death, she's got like a darker aspect. So you've got these dueling goddesses going on in the background of the story as well. So you've got your good versus evil, basically, when it comes down to it. And that magic kind of grew into this. I didn't mean for this to happen. It just grew. It grew into this battle of free will versus non-free will, and what religion does to free will. So I love that you brought that up, because that, happened in my book, and it became this theme throughout the entire series of, are the goddesses in control of what they have to do, or do they get a choice in the matter? And so the main character is faced with, she's prophesied to save the world, basically. But she's like, well, do I get a choice in this? Do I get to make a decision for myself where I get to choose who I love, or I get to choose who I want to protect? And that is the battle she faces throughout the entire book. And she doesn't really understand how to make the choice. So it's funny because I didn't mean for it to happen, but the religion and the idea that there's no free will because of religion, or that there's no choice in the matter for when you make a decision that is going to change the lives of other people, that became such a common theme throughout all of my books. And then somebody brought it up, and I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize I was doing that. So I love that. I love that, that you brought that up, because it was such an eye-opening experience for me that I wrote that. I believe that. It's definitely my beliefs. And then I saw it on paper, and I'm like, oh, wow, cool.
Damn, that is so gangsta. I mean, there's one thing for me to like really try my hardest to like push an idea through, and then it could like get lopsided. Whereas you just wrote something and then somebody found it like in the rough. I think that is, I mean, textbook.
It made so my year better. Like, yeah, hearing that comment from somebody was like, oh my gosh, somebody's reading my book and looking at it like you would in a classroom, like actually reading my book. So yeah, that's been the highlight of my year.
I'd get that tattooed somewhere. I don't know.
Right? I've already got 6 tattoos. I don't think I should have more, but
oh my God. I need to get more tattoos. Which is such a weird sensation, huh? If you try to explain that, especially that I love I feel like a common thing that like youth does is that they can't really like put themselves in like older people's shoes and like think how it would have been to like how to be young in their generation. So I like having those conversations just to like understand how people think. And my favorite is when I talk to my uncles and my aunts, and they're just like, yeah, but why get tattoos? And I have no debate. I have no argument. I'm just like, I mean, I don't know. Can you imagine me with a nice little, I mean, it would look nice. It was like, yeah, but why? Yeah, I don't know.
Just because I want it. That's all that matters.
I want it. So like, like, you know, and then of course you get like defensive.
Right.
It's like, oh, why you wear your hair like that? It's like, oh, wait, why your shoes like that? Why your shoes like, you know, brown? Why don't they just like black? It's like, all right. But do you, man, talking about tattoos and runes, because runes, the Celtic use like runes as well, right?
Yep.
And especially when you were talking about all those like the stones and you the ley lines, that's what the stones are for, right? To like convey energy and whatnot. Did you get to use like runes, and like did you develop that whole like a system of like runes, and do the characters have like cool tattoos that like do some type of, you know, like do you use symbolism in any way like that?
So I use runes in a very simple way because I didn't want to go too far into the runes just because for me, there's a lot of books out there right now that have stuff like that. One that comes to my mind is Mortal Instruments series. It's a YA series that uses that for their Nephilim, so for the fallen angels, or the children of the fallen angels. And so I didn't really want to go down that route of having the tattoos because I didn't want people to be like, well, she's just copying, you know, that's what they did. So what I did use them for though, is that I decorated the castles and basically the walls and the bindings. So anything that held prisoners or anything that protected has runes on it in my world. So like the castles have runes to protect against the goddesses. The cells have runes to keep people who have magic bound, so they can't use their magic when they're bound by those runes. And then also the runes can be used not in battle per se, but again, as a protection. So if you're camping somewhere and you like draw a rune, that can be used as a protection as well. So I went with the protective runes rather than the power runes and like the magic runes, just because my characters are already born with magic. So they're inherently magical. They don't need anything to conjure that. They just kind of have to learn control because magic comes with a cost. So as long as they have their control and they learn how to use it, they're fine. But obviously if they are out of control, then they throw them in jail and they put their little like shackles on them and they can't use their magic.
Now that's really interesting. So you said that magic is defined by like elemental and by phase. So does each like magic user have a fae companion that they kind of derive their energy from?
Not a companion, although soulmates are a thing in fae culture and in my books, which again goes to play with that free will, because the way that I used soulmates was in a negative.
That's that heart ring with the that way or that way, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I used it in a negative, actually. It's not that they don't like each other. It's not that the soulmates don't get along and they don't love each other. They do, but it is this lack of choice. So they're forced to fall in love together and then they question their love because they're soulmates. They question themselves and they're like, well, what if we weren't soulmates? Would we still love each other? So it's a fantasy romance. So I have to have like all those elements of romance in there. So I do use that with my free will. But as for companionship with the runes and like the elements, no, they each have their own magic. It's dependent on when they become a teenager, they basically grow into whatever element they have. My main character is special. Obviously, she has to be special. So she has more than one element, but most just get one element. And then some of my fairies, my fae, have wings as well. So if they're extra blessed by the goddess, which is how they view it as a blessing from the goddess, they get wings and they can fly. So that's kind of how I distinguish between the different types of fae. And because there's royalty in my story, there's a lot of class difference. So people look down on fae that don't have wings, or they look down on fae that don't have certain magical abilities. So it really differentiates. And that's kind of part of what my character wants to get rid of in the story. She wants to get rid of those, those lines that are bringing people apart rather than putting them together.
Now, can muggles see magic? Now, if let's say that you have wings and you're fully blessed, right? And I'm not blessed at all. I'm like, driving around in a car and whatnot. If you're flying around Main Street, do I see the wings, or to me, are you just flying? You know what I mean?
You would see the wings. In my
Okay.
world, you would see the wings, which is why they're hidden under, their magical land. They're not in the real world.
Dope.
So when my main character is brought into the magical land, one of the first things she sees is somebody with wings. And she's like, whoa, I'm going crazy. Like, what's happening? That man has wings. I need to run away. And that's her mindset. Like, her mindset is, oh my God, like, I've gone insane. So it's definitely a separation between human and fae, that if they were in the real world, you would definitely see it and you would be like, oh my God, like, what's wrong with that person? Why do they have wings? How are they flying?
My God. So we already got the inspiration, but how did like the story progress after the initial inspiration from Ireland? How did you progress from there? How did the story take off into book 2, into book 3, into book 4, the finale?
Yeah, I'm very character driven. So I feel like my main character kind of drove the car through all 4 books. I was just like the backseat driver, kind of saying, hey, let's go left, or hey, let's go right. People always say that. They say, like, my main character, just did their own thing and I'm just going along for the ride. But that
Yeah.
absolutely happened with my books. Like, I had a plan when I wrote book 1, and that is not what the books are about anymore. So I love that. I love that I plotted out an entirely different book, and now I have this incredible story that I love and is dear to my heart. But yeah, I think that it just grew from the character. The plot was important to me, but the character was more important. I think that having a fully fleshed out character who has this great arc and who, comes to this conclusion at the end and discovers something about themselves is what was important in my mind. So that is what I kind of aimed for. And the plot just pushed that along. I always say you can't have one without the other. You can't have plot without character, and you can't have character without plot.
Mm.
So my plot just kind of lifted my character up, and my character grew throughout the entire thing. So to answer your question, the development was just, I knew what I wanted my character to learn in the end. So I knew that I wanted her to have this growing up story, because she's very young and she's impulsive and she doesn't, know what she wants most of the time. But I wanted by the end for her to be ready to be like a leader, because she's supposed to be a queen. I wanted her to learn how to be a queen. I wanted her to learn that being an adult is not easy. It's challenging, and it comes with losing people that you love, and it comes with learning how to grieve and also move on. So my character faces a lot of those regular life lessons along the way, and that kind of developed my plot for me, because I wanted her to hit those points.
My God, you bring up a really interesting kind of point. So you developed this whole other plot that you thought that was going to be what you steamroll through, but then when you got to actually writing it, you went another way.
Yes.
Can you like go into that a little bit deeper? Like, what were the main differences? Like, how much did you stray from your main idea? Well, from your original idea.
It feels like so long ago now. So my
What,
original
2017?
idea, what's that?
That was 17, right? So like 4 years.
Yeah. Um, so with my original idea, my character was, I want to say, much younger. She wasn't, she was more like 15 or 16 and trying to learn how to be older and trying to learn how to find her place in this world. Whereas where I wrote this story, or when I, went into editing and changed my story, now she's 18 and she is on the cusp of being an adult, and she still feels like she's a child and still gets annoyed that she's treated like a child, but she's also supposed to be an adult because she's supposed to be the queen. Um, so that changed. That was a huge change, actually, since obviously that changes the entire perspective of the book.
Yeah.
I also originally was going to write in first person, and I changed that to writing in third person. And that completely changed the book as well. And I have multiple points of views now, instead of it just being from one person's perspective. So a lot of the structural parts of the story were changed from what I originally thought it was going to be. As for the plot itself, I did not picture her ending up with the person that she ended up with for a romance. So it's a romance story. And I thought that I was going to change it. And I thought that I was going to, make her lose the love of her life and then move on type thing. And that's just not what happened. And I couldn't bring my heart to, kill off one of my main characters, even though I killed off a lot of other people. So yeah, I think that the overall tone of the story changed. Whereas before it was lighthearted and it was this girl trying to grow up, and it turned a lot darker into, this girl trying to live through her grief and understanding that life is hard and that adulting is hard and that she knows nothing about it. So it got darker, I should say.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, I'm a huge fan of darker. I mean, I'm a huge fan of anything like, that's like good and gripping, because character development is a huge thing. And it kind of does lead into something that I've been aching to get into. But before I get into that, I just had my head turning that as you were talking. Do you think that the changes that you made to the book, do you think they were environmental? Like personally, do you think that you made those changes after you personally grew, or you personally had something in your life, or was it environmental that made you change that?
Yeah, I think maybe part of it was because obviously I'm older than my main character is. Obviously, I'm 27, she's 18. So I've been through life and I've been through that and I know what it feels like. And a lot of her stuff does come out of my own personal experience, just because that's just what we do as writers. We put our own, hearts into our characters.
Definitely.
But I think in general with this series, we were going through quarantine and we were going through, this pandemic and what that means to be stuck at home for however long. And I was kind of living vicariously through my character, like, oh my gosh, she's out on these adventures. And but yeah, it probably took a dark turn because of the kind of dark situation we were in the process of when I was writing it.
Yeah, if I can be honest, that's kind of like the dots I was connecting, because you're plotting it out that when you first had the idea in 2017, it was like, XYZ, and then when you started getting through it, which was, as you began talking about, was like during quarantine. So I immediately started thinking of like, one, not just a darker turn, but also the way that you started going about the character and everything. It seemed very environmental, because the same thing happened to me when I started writing the Allegory of the End. It was like based on, like, I was a huge fan of like Marvel, and like all the Marvel movies were coming out. So like my first iteration of the plot seemed very superhero-y. It was like basically plotted just like a comic book, and it didn't make any sense until like I looked at it like later, and it was like, all right, it needs to be a little more genuine. That thought the comment that you made earlier about like worrying about your ideas being like copies of other people's ideas.
Yeah.
One of my biggest paranoias. And there's nothing more soul crushing that when you're watching like a new movie or new TV show, and then those, it doesn't even have to be a major plot. They just say one line that's similar to your plot, and you're like, oh my God, these motherfuckers. They're in my house. They got my email.
They're
How
listening
do they know?
to me.
How do they know? Stephen King, goddamn you. You have enough money.
Right. Please stop writing books so I can write a book.
Oh my God. But one of the like, just off that idea, so romance fantasy is the genre that you're working on right now. You just finished up your 4 books, available now on Amazon Kindle. What was I even saying? Kindle? Skyhorn, Wings of Fate, Kingdom of Fairies. Pick it up now. Skyhorn.com is where you can get everything. And Skyhorn with an E. SKYE horn, just regular horn.com. I hope you don't need me to spell .com. But but going off that idea, what do you think is going to be in the future? What holds next for you? Because you seem to be a huge fan of Star Wars, as I kind of brushed upon in the beginning of the podcast. So you're a fan of sci-fi, fan of romance. I'm assuming a fan of fantasy, which is like, the more Tolkien-esque role, like, dwarves and elves and whatnot. So what do you think, with such a broad, landscape of things that you like, what do you think you're going to go into?
Yeah. So I actually have that planned because I'm going to be starting it. I started it. I just need to get back to it. I have 2 different projects that I am kind of debating between. The first one, which is the one that I've already started, is a paranormal romance. It's vampires and werewolves and basically anything that goes bump in the night. I want to say it's like maybe Crescent City meets Vampire Academy. If you've heard of either of those, it's like Academy books versus, I don't even know how to explain Crescent City. It's just it's its own world. But
I
yeah,
know what
so
that
it's
is.
a
What am I
vampire
talking about?
romance.
Yes.
It's a vampire romance, so that would be probably what my next one is going to be. It's going to be new adult rather than young adult because I want to go a little more mature, maybe a little darker. I found my way into the darker genre this time, so I figured I'll go a little bit farther. And then the other one, like you said, I'm a huge fan of Star Wars. I love sci-fi. I'm sci-fi, fantasy, paranormal, anything that is not real. That's my gig. So my other option is I want to do a sci-fi smuggler novel. So based on a female smuggler who basically is taking on the galaxy by herself and then finds herself in that, that quirky Scooby-Doo gang. One of my favorite tropes is Scooby-Doo gang. That's really hard to say fast. So I want to go with that as well. But I think I'm going to do vampires first, just because from my reader base and from the fans that I have right now, they seem more interested in that. So I'm leaning towards going that way and then going back to the sci-fi later on.
Now that is really interesting. Do you think, now let's say that, I mean, you already have crazy success and I really hope the most for you, right? But let's say that it just continues growing, that you just blow up completely on romance. Would that mean that you completely nix the other sides of your writing game? Like,
no, I think I would get a pen name and, write under a pen name for a while. And I think that'd be fun.
Huh. That is an interesting thing. Why do you think that well, I guess because like your name eventually represents a genre. If if you were to pick up a Stephen King book and it's a comedy, you'd be like, yo, what the fuck? I get that. Right. I get that. I don't know.
It's just marketing. It's just marketing.
It is marketing. I guess I'm a hippie because, in my head, I'm like, nah, man, I want to be a writer, man, and write whatever I want, I don't want to be limited.
I agree with that completely. I completely agree. But when it comes to selling books, it does get a little difficult if you are mixing genres.
No, yeah, that makes complete sense. Actually kind of heartbreaking. Because, what you said about getting into the writing game is, not a single word offbeat with that. It is unreal how much you have to Google, how many times you second guess yourself. Especially, I'm almost envious that you had like such a cool network of people around you.
It's fun.
Well, it wasn't just like the Instagram thing, which is why I'm so happy that I got an idea of that. Because when I was in college and I got my idea, I was in engineering school. So when I try to talk to my professors that I had around me for English that were just, God knows what English people are doing at an engineering school, right? So when I would try to talk to them about it, they would be like, yeah, get the fuck out of here. I got things to do. Or it would just be like, I would try to reach out to them and be like, oh, I'm busy that day. It's like, I didn't give you a day. It's like, nah, I'm busy whenever you want me to be. It's just, you couldn't get anything in. Know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then finally you find people and it's just like such a more interactive community and everything just feels, it's unreal how much, because the reality of it is that most of it is on you. But it's unreal how much just one little finger on your shoulder, just being like, oh no, yeah, it's all right. This has been done before. Yep. You're not the first person going through this stress. It's unreal how that one little push is enough to really get you through a lot.
I think it's necessary. I think it's good to have, even if it's one or two people that you can be like, hey, I'm writing a book and I need you to be my support system, or I need you to read my book before it goes through editing and it's going to be terrible, but just read it anyway and give me your feedback. Like, you need those people in your life that are willing to, be honest with you and also say like, hey, you're not alone. And that, I think it's important. I think it's something I didn't know about before, but I would be very sad if I didn't have now, I guess I should say.
Oh my God. And you know what? Do you remember the first critique that you ever got that broke your heart, but in the best way possible? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like it broke your heart to read it, to think that you have like kind of failed yourself in that degree, but like it's the best critique you could have gotten in your life. And like you apply almost every time that you pick up a pencil or do anything, you write your name and you like think about that.
Yeah. That actually happened with my with Wings of Fate. I had something my editor said, and I keep it in my head all the time now. And I had to rewrite 8 chapters of my book because of that one thing she said. But I never had to do it again because it's there and I know it now. And I'm, I'm not going to make the mistakes again.
Oh, God bless her. My friend,
Right.
what he did is the very first time that I had like a good like draft in my head that I thought was good, quote unquote. I was like pressuring a good friend of mine who was very well read, and I out of all my friends was definitely the person that if I could get him to be on my side, that I felt that I was on a right path. And I remember I sent it to him through email, right? And at the time I'm living in Boston, and we each, it's our senior year, we each have our own apartment, and luckily he lived down the street from me. So I remember I sent to him through email the night before. I woke up to go to my class at like 7:45, and stapled, like taped on my door, is a printed out chapter, right? With pen marks all over it. And I'm like, yo, the hell? Pick it up. And homeboy circled every time I used the word I. That's all he did, right? That thing looked like it had pimples and it was 12 years old. I'm trying to tell you, it was just covered. I said I every three lines. I did this, I did that, then we did this, then I did that, I. And I can't tell you, if you read my stuff now, there's like 3 eyes per page. Like I replace
Yeah.
it, I'm terminated with that now. Like it's
You
unreal.
learn. Yeah.
That and said, like the first time that
Mhm.
you try to like do that whole like, interaction of conversation, it's always like, oh, he replied, she grimaced, they retorted. It's like, no, it's said, it's invisible,
Yep.
it cuts through words. And that, I think that's really hard too, because like you always have this idea of like, being hip. He's like, oh, I want to do what hasn't been done before. It's like, nah, there's certain things you
Do
got
what
to stick to.
works.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Do what works.
Yeah. uh what what really do you think is like the thing that was the biggest kind of shakeup for you, going from like the idea of like I want to do my own thing, don't care about opinions, to being like, oh no, I really have to kind of stay a little more in line here.
So I was reading a lot of indie books, like self-published books on Amazon, and I was noticing a pattern of people who publish their books and don't get them edited and
Mm,
don't, get feedback. And you can tell, you can 100%
first
tell
page.
when a book has not been edited
Yep.
or when it has not been, beta read or whatever. And I was thinking, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the one that somebody is reading the book and they're like, wow, this person didn't try. So that was kind of my turning point. I was trying to be supportive of the indie community, and I was realizing that so many people just don't do the work. They just, write the book and then put it out there. And there's so much more to self-publishing than that. There's so much more, and there's so many steps you have to take. And so I told myself I was not going to be that person, even if it, cost me money to go get my editor and it cost me money to get a cover designer. I'm going to do everything I can to make it the best book that it can be. And that means taking the critiques from people that may not like my book. And it means, hearing the bad stuff and the good stuff alike. So that has been my mentality since those days. And I'm happy that I'm that way now, because I feel like I am much more open to critique. And I like critical criticism. I like to hear, hey, you could have done this better. And this is how, and this is what I think. And I have 3 or 4 ladies in my life who I send my work to all the time, and they tear it apart for me, and it's perfect. I love it. I love when they tear apart my work.
Oh God bless them. I don't know if you have the same type of paranoia, but to me, I don't feel like my stuff is like well critiqued until I get that negative. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
Like I'll send it out to like 5 people, and then those 5 people will be like, oh great, and like I almost don't believe them. It's like I can basically throw that in the trash. It's like, nah, yeah, no, I need that
Yeah. I
one
know
person.
I'm not perfect, so please tell me what I'm doing wrong.
Exactly. That's all I have in my head. It's like, all right, so you're telling me I'm first draft Johnny over here. I have no
Yeah.
work needed. I don't need nothing done. That's what you're telling me? I doubt it heavily. There's no
Yeah.
possible way.
I'm the
But
same way. If there's no critique in there, if there's no negative feedback, and not to say that there's not positive too, I love the positive as well. But
oh, it
if
makes
there's
your day.
not something in there that's telling me how I could be better, then we're not working. Like this critique is not working.
Without a single doubt. And to kind of like take that a little further, there's what you were talking about with the whole like indie community and like doing like the whole work behind it. There is nothing, I mean, you're preaching, you know, you're singing my song in every direction, every note. Cause it's something that you see innately, and it's a paranoia that kind of develops within me. That it's like you know, you get your first editing pass and you almost start getting paranoid. It's like, oh, maybe that's not enough, and you start getting all this like crazy thing. And it's why it's like pushed me to the point that I am now. That's why I look at a person like you, and it's really a huge inspiration. Knocked out 4 books in a year, phenomenal. I'm over here, it's still taking me. I still haven't, finished my first yet, and I feel like
It's okay.
I feel like a lot of that is due to paranoia, and I think it's kind of a dichotomy. Is where you need to have that, that you perfectionist, and make sure that you're not just like dropping it into the wolves without any no trimmings, no salt, no nothing, right? But at the same degree, and it's something that Steve R. Gans said. I think it was the second or third episode of this podcast, and he was talking about that he didn't really start publishing until like his 50s for the same type of paranoia until he reached that point that, all right, there is no perfection that I'm going to reach in my head. I just need to get to a point that I'm proud of it and then go from that point. So I think I'm trying to find the middle in between those two bridges. Know what I mean? Of like being a perfectionist, but also understanding that you need to drop it. You need to do
Yeah.
the work. You can't just hold on forever and hope it's going to be a bestseller in your head, in your hard
Yeah.
drive that nobody reads.
Right. Some of my favorite advice that someone gave me, and I don't remember who it was, but it was when I first started writing, is that be the best writer you can be right now. Be the best you can be right now. And that doesn't mean you can't get better, because if you can't get better, then you hit your peak, and you don't want to hit your peak. You want to always be improving. You always want to like have a better book coming, have a better, project coming up next. So that's the way I look at it now, is that if I'm reading my manuscript and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, I don't know how to make this any better. That's the best I can be. And I might look at it a year from now and say, wow, I could have done this different, and I could have done this different, but that was still the best I could have been at that point in my life. So I feel like looking at it that way has just completely changed the way I write, because I know that like Wings of Fate, for example, I know Wings of Fate was the best that it could have been for what I was at that point in my life. But Wings of Deception, my second book, I had higher hopes for myself, and I've higher like bounds that I wanted to reach, because I knew what I was capable of with the book before. So I just keep growing, keep going. And I learn something new every day and apply it to what I'm doing in my life and what I'm writing. And it's just made it a lot easier to deal with that paranoia and that, worry that it's not good enough or it's not perfect enough, or I like looking at it like, you're right, maybe it's not perfect, but I'm going to get better and my next book is going to be amazing. So if you don't think it's perfect now, that's fine. My next one, it's going to be great.
Man, I love that. I really do. That could be on a throw pillow.
Right? Painted on my wall.
At least a poster or something. But man, and it got me at the moment you were talking about it. I just started thinking about it. It's something that I always ask male writers about writing female characters. I'm kind of flipping the script. How do you feel about writing male characters?
I am terrified of writing male characters. I 100% honestly, I feel like
so it feels the same way.
It goes both ways. Basically, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to write this character, and then a guy is going to read it and they'll be like, wow, this was written by a female writer. Like, she has no idea how men think. So it is literally the same thing. It goes both ways.
Yep.
I have male beta readers. I have guys in my life who I'm like, hey, including my husband, hey, read this. Tell me if, you would actually act this way, and go from there. But, you just have to do the best you can do and make sure that you get advice from people. It's just like writing diverse characters and writing, characters who are of a different, sexual orientation. I don't want to do that wrong. I don't want to say something that is going to offend somebody or hurt somebody. So I like to have like sensitivity readers, I call them, who can look at it and be like, okay, maybe don't write it that way. Maybe say this instead. So I think that's really important with writing, because obviously, we're putting our words on paper. It's going to be something that lasts a long time, hopefully. And you don't want to be remembered as the person who, wrote a character that didn't make any sense to what an actual person is like.
Man, that's really interesting. What are your favorite examples of really good character development, like in TV shows and movies and in books?
Yeah. That's really hard. So I'll go with movies first, just because I did this recently. You said you checked out the Sci-Fi chat I did with Matthew, right?
Yeah.
So we talked about Anakin Skywalker. He's one of my favorite, character developments, because I feel like over the course of all of those movies, he just grew from, this kid who had a sucky life to this adult that had a sucky life, but there was a huge arc in between, and all these things that had to happen to get him to that point, to that tragedy. So that's one of my favorites. I could talk about that for hours. Obviously, I did talk about that for a couple hours with Matthew. One of my favorite TV show characters is a morally gray character, Damon Salvatore from the Vampire Diaries. He starts off as the villain, and he becomes, the good guy in the end, the twisted good guy who is kind of a psychopath, but also thinks he's doing the right thing the entire time through. So again, you get that full character arc of, he starts one way and you hate him and you don't want anything to do with him. And then by the end of the show, you're like crying because he sacrificed himself or whatever. So I think if an author or a writer can convey that and can make you love a character that is not likable, that is amazing for me. If the character is not likable and suddenly by the end of the story, you love them and you are cheering them on or you are crying about them, then that writer has succeeded, in my opinion. So those are my favorite types of characters.
Man, you touched on something that I have been piecing together for, I think, the last 2 months. There is a show called Money Heist on Netflix. It's called Casa de Papel in Spanish. It's a Spanish show, like originally, but it has like pretty good like English subtitles and whatnot. I recommend it. It's about it's a robbery, but it's very romantic. Very romantic. Of course, it's a Spanish TV show, so it's romantic to another degree. I mean, to the point that like the hostages are falling in love with one another, and it's like real love. I mean, crazy stuff, but it's
Stockholm
really.
Syndrome.
Oh my! You don't. Oh my God! Look, I'll tell you right now. One of the things that I literally talked about in the podcast I recorded this morning. There's a character that now. All right, so I'll make an extension to that rule that you said. So not only do you like a character that you hate, that you grow to love, but dumb characters as well. Tell me not.
Yes.
For whatever reason, if a character's like dumb and you know it and they admit it, like if they're dumb and they're ignorant, you hate them. But if they're dumb and they admit to it, but they're kind of kind-hearted, if they're simple, you fall in love with them. So this show has a character named Berlin. No, Berlin. Well, that's a character, but it's the wrong person. Denver falls in love with a hostage named Monica. Now, they get their whole little thing going, but then Denver admits it to his crew members, and they tell him about Stockholm Syndrome. And saying it's like, yo, she's not really in love with you. This is, there's a Stockholm Syndrome.
Weird, creepy stuff.
Exactly. So homeboy gets like mad at himself, and then like he gets like distant from Monica. So then Monica brings it up, and then homeboy turns to her and be like, hey, listen, you're sick. And she's like, what are you talking about, sick? And she goes like, listen, you got Stockholm Syndrome. You don't even know what you're talking about, blah, blah, blah. Like simple. He doesn't even he thinks that's like she got the flu.
Right.
I think one of the lines that like when his crew members like call him out and say this Stockholm Syndrome, his response to that is like, all right, well, if she's sick, we'll treat it together. We'll do it together. He's like, no, you can't treat it together because you're the one causing it. And he's like, oh, like I'm like just like an idiot. You know what I mean? And that sincerity is what makes you fall in love with a character, because it makes you realize that he really thinks that she's sick, and that his willingness to kind of let go of the relationship truly shows that he has empathy towards that character. And the same thing for characters that you hate, because that show does a great example of like bringing up characters that just seem completely psychopathic, just on a different level. And then at the end of the season, when they do that nice little sacrifice, you're like, busting a tear. There is something about that
Right.
type of writing that it just pulls you in. And I love that you started talking about Anakin, because one of the inspirations for my book, and I think you're gonna love it, is I had never watched Star Wars up in I think 2018. I had no, I'm sorry, 2015. I had never watched Star Wars, and it was a random summer after my first year of college, and I was like, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna knock out like the 6 movies in a week, and I did
Wow.
that. And I did that, and I remember my like feeling towards the end of it was like, this is like amazing, but I don't like how it seemed like it was like how they villainized the Anakin character. Like, cause in my head, it was like, like that transition makes a lot more sense than you're like playing it out to be. And like, I think there's a lot more empathy to be drawn to that negative character that's being shown, and a lot more empathy given to the positive side, when in reality, they're not that positive, right? Which is, I think,
Right.
like, I think why Rogue One was great, because it showed that the Republic is also really about it's a war, and
It's a
wars,
war. Yeah.
it's written by the victors. Everything that we've been shown is by like the Republic being the rebellion. But one of my favorite things about the Star Wars like mythos is that it's always in a constant like cycle. Everything we've been
Hmm.
shown is a rebellion with the Sith being like overlords, but like the story and the lore and the history goes both ways. there's been there's also been like, Sith persecution by the Jedi, and the Jedi just like, ruling the entire galaxy. It's just everything we've been shown is XYZ. So like, what kind of got me into the idea of writing was trying to see the opposite side of like, what would happen if you really took both sides of this thing, and like just showed it completely from a neutral point of view. You show this
Yeah.
point of view, and then you show that point of view, and you as the character is kind of, you develop what Sith and what Jedi is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the cool thing about with Star Wars too is that in those first, like in the prequels, you get to see a lot of this arrogance on the Jedi side of things, and them thinking like everything that they say is right, and that you have to follow these rules, and that Anakin is like the foil character to that. And he's like, well, if what you're saying is right, but it's going to lead to my mom's death, or it's going to lead to my wife's death, then how is it right? How is that something that I should be following? And so I think that was what was really cool for me with his character, was that you get to see him questioning, society, questioning religion, questioning everything he's been taught is correct. And then he ends up being the bad guy. He ends up being the one that is, Darth Vader in the end, and destroying the galaxy, all because nobody would answer his questions. And I think that goes into, what our whole society is most of the time, is kids asking questions, and kids saying, hey, why do we do this? Why do we do that? And then adults being like, no, we don't need to talk about that. It's okay. You'll understand when you're older, but then they never understand because they're never explained to. So I think that is what really makes his character so interesting for me, is just that view on society that the whole Star Wars trilogy takes.
Wow. Now,
I'm sorry, I'm going to tangent off into Star Wars talk if we continue.
do not apologize. That, my God. No, 'cause I live for like deep in like analyze. I can't even speak right now. I live for like deep dives and like examinations into like what character development and all these things. And I have to say, I had never thought about that way with Anakin. That's so interesting, because I guess it really was like kind of the rebellion. My God, that's even more interesting, because the whole thing of Star Wars is rebellion. So
Hmm.
it's interesting that the person that ends up leading the Empire origin is from a self rebellion of the Jedi side, basically.
Yeah.
My God, now that's something, huh? Man, George Lucas really. I have to say, I have a love hate relationship with Star Wars. Whereas like one year I think it's like the best thing ever, and another year I think it's like, whatever, like who cares about that?
Right.
And I think that stems a lot out of like jealousy, just because like I've had this conversation, I think like a couple times before. Tell me that you couldn't fit just about every good story within the Star Wars universe. It
Yeah, pretty
encompasses
much.
everything. It's
It
unreal.
does.
You can
It's not
put
fair.
it's not fair. I think about that frequently, especially, and thank God that you have the same paranoia of I do of like copying ideas. I feel like I have to keep on up to date with Star Wars just to make sure all my bases are met and I'm not copying
Yeah.
anything. I mean, you can't even use the word droids and drones without eliciting some type of Star Wars effects. It's unreal.
Yeah, it's funny because I wrote a flash fiction snippet, a sci-fi, and it's on my blog on my website, but I used the word blaster. And that is just a normal word. Blaster is just a normal word. But immediately it was like, oh, this is like Star Wars. I'm like, oh my God, like that's
Mm-hmm.
not fair. It's just a gun.
It's not fair. It really is not
Yeah.
fair, especially
So
with
yeah, I completely agree.
because it takes everything. It's the whole history aspect of like like galactic like lore and you're like long like over like long crazy periods of time. Then you have like magic with like the force, and then you have
Yep.
sci-fi with like the whole like smuggler thing, which is why I love like the idea that you were talking about with the female smuggler. I think that's a phenomenal idea. Do you have a name for that, or it's just like a work in
It's just an
progress?
idea right now. I got nothing. The idea like bloomed from the fact that there's not a lot of female leads in sci-fi and it's mostly male leads. And I thought it'd be really cool to see like the badass girl who's gonna come into and be like, Han Solo of whatever, just because obviously again, Star Wars takes claim to everything, including
Everything,
smugglers.
everything.
um,
It's not fair.
yeah, but that's kind of where my mindset was, is that I want the girl to get to save the day on the sci-fi world, because it's a very very male oriented genre, which is great. I love all the male characters. Like I said, Anakin's one of my favorites, so Han Solo is one of my favorite, obviously, but I think it'd be cool to see a different view on the sci-fi world where it's not just about the boys.
One of my favorite characters, and especially because I'm a guy and I'm like I do like comic books and whatnot. I don't know if you do this, but I have kind of like a power grade in my head of like who the strongest characters I've
Yeah.
ever written are. You know what I mean? Do you do the same thing?
Yeah, kind of.
So the strongest character I've ever written is uh Banshee, which is just like a nickname that she's given. She's a female space pirate. Well, she's a space
That's
pirate
cool.
that's just like and she is actually the first character I've ever written, which is like the first idea, like the first time I've ever tried to write a character that you specifically hate, and then like starting to grow to love, because I felt the same way, but I felt that representation was really low with villains. Like there's
I
very
agree.
times that you ever see like a woman that is truly completely bad, and not because some man did her wrong, not
Yes.
because like some crazy, something that like I'm talking about villain, like she's villainous. In her soul, there's something wrong with her when she was born. Who knows why the cycle's doing what she's doing, but she's a villain and on all hearts of it. And it's something that I fell in love with, and especially because the idea of pirate, when you think of like Blackbeard, when you think of honestly Christopher Columbus, right? The
Hmm.
vicious pirating is like messed up business, right? So when I was thinking of how a woman would kind of take control of that much like power without people like questioning her, is that she would have to be, if they're at 10, she's at 12. Like she's even more nuts than these people, doing even like dumber and just more outrageous things that like really get the idea of like ruthlessness. But it's genuine. She is
Yeah.
just like, messed up herself. But then kind of like the what she symbolizes, like the idea of rebellion versus the kind of like the big guys, and kind of like sparks kind of like her own kind of character development. And then by the end of it, she's kind of kind of a rebellion leader, and people kind of like follow into like into suit and whatnot.
That's really cool. I like that.
Well, I gotta say, the moment you said that the thing about the smuggler, I was like, oh my God. I just It's just a phenomenal idea, isn't it? Like, to you, what is like the image that you have in your head? Because you say you're very, very visual. When you think of that smuggler thing, what do you think is like take me to your into your headspace of that? What is the visual that you see when you think of that?
Yeah. So with her, it's funny because, like I said, I actually wrote this little flash fiction piece, right? And so that is actually based around her and being this, again, young, but not too young, who has been on her own since she was in her teenage years. And knows how to work space. She knows how to fly her own ship. She knows how to, you know, do the deals that need to be done in order to survive in a place that is as fathomless and as cruel as what space is in my story. So I almost want space to be the villain here, space to be the one that tears her away from her family and tears her away from the people that she loves. But then the way that the story plays out in my head is that she's going to find this new family, this one that is not, you know, they're not blood, they're just friends. They're a crew of people that she didn't ever think she needed because she's been on her own for so long, and she doesn't trust people, and she doesn't, you know, work well with others. And then she's that type of character who nobody gets along with because she doesn't want to get along with you. And they're going to hit the soft spot for her. So they're going to be, you know, the ones that she would risk her life for, even though she's never been that type of person before. She's always been selfish. She's always been on her own, like having to make sure that she can take care of herself. So I thought that it'd be really cool to see that type of character who is not only a female badass, but selfish female badass. She's somebody who only thinks about herself and only thinks about what she needs to do to get to the next point in her life. And then have her soften and have her become more of what you would expect from that Scooby-Doo type of gang where she fits in and she's never fit in before. So that is kind of just the very generic, because obviously I haven't gone very far with that series, but the very generic version of the character that I picture in my head is this somebody who needs to change, who doesn't want to change, and who is resistant to change, but kind of finds out that it's not so bad after all, that, you know, you can have other people in your life and you can escape the void of space and still live your life without being fearful of everything that's going on.
Man, that's awesome. Man, I really like the way that you plot your ideas. So you already, it really is 100% character driven, because you don't think, because I think about it through which is really interesting. What you were talking about, like the way that you develop your characters, a lot, you're 100% right. A lot of people say that they develop their stories the same way that you do, where they have a character and the character just kind of drives the plot and kind of just like everything is derived off the character. I usually go by like a plot or like of an idea that I like, and I go for the end, and then like the characters kind of fill in that void in between. So it's so interesting to hear kind of the flip side of it.
Yeah.
Do you ever think that you'll go a different route? Do you ever think that you'll go into, especially that you talk about like visual, do you ever think you'll go into like a graphic novel? Do you ever think that you'll go into like those interactive books that that are like getting like more and more popular?
I don't know about the interactive books. I don't know that I could write that very well.
Yeah,
Maybe I could in the
really
future. I'm
technical.
not going to, you know, say no, because obviously never say no. But for graphic novels, I think that would be really cool. I love to read them. So I think that it would be interesting and kind of a new experience to try and do that. I can't draw, so I'd have to hire somebody. But yeah, I think that would be kind of fun. It's a totally different thing though, because with graphic novels, everything's visual. Like you have your words in there, but if they're not supported by the correct type of illustration, if they're not, you know, lifted up by that illustration, then they're not as powerful. And you could have words or you could have good pictures, but if you don't have both and they're not connecting the right way, then it just doesn't work. So I feel like that's a really difficult, you know, medium to go into, but I would totally be up for trying it out eventually. I think that'd be fun.
Man, you actually, you spoke with so much truth right now that you actually just gave me a little paranoia, because Banshee is actually a graphic novel, and I'm gonna be start paneling in it in like a couple months, and I'm really happy with my artist. But what you just said is really true. I mean, there's a lot
You're
of
gonna do fine.
Yeah, there's a lot of synchrony though. Yeah, that's really good point though. What do you think is the future of what you're doing all together? You said that you have a publisher, so you're not doing the, well, you actually,
No, I'm self-published.
so you
Yeah,
are
I'm
self-published, and
self-published.
then you have an
Yeah,
editor. Okay, I don't know
I
why
have an editor.
when you said that whole thing that I have like an editor, I immediately thought of like, oh, you must be published through like the actual route and like whatnot, which made a lot of sense, especially with like all the good reviews that I heard. I was like, yeah, it makes sense. She's like professionally published, obviously. Uh, um, so what do you think is the future? Like, do you have a publishing company yet, or how is that going?
So right now, everything I do is sole proprietorship, so it's all under my own name. Um, I think that next year I might start an LLC, just to get everything into its own place. I
Mhm.
didn't want to give myself another job to do this year, so I just decided I would do it all under my own name first. But future wise, I'm one of those people that likes to give myself like 3 to 5 year plans. So my,
Yeah, me too.
3 year plan by the time I'm 30, because that's coming up, my 3 year plan is to be able to work only as a writer and to not have my day job any longer. So that is my goal. Um, Getting there, working on those sales and writing more books and just keeping up with the marketing. That's really difficult, but it's fun and I love every moment of it. Basically, I'm writing full time right now and working full time. So it's like 2 jobs, but it's what I want to do. So I think that is my future goal. That's where I want to go with all of this. And maybe traditionally publish one day. I'm not putting that off the table because it's becoming more common to do hybrid publishing where you do, you self-publish for a while, then you pick up a book and you do traditional publishing while you're still self-publishing. So I might do that in the future, maybe with that sci-fi novel, if I can find a market for it. So I don't I don't know that that's, near future, maybe 5 years instead of 3, but I think that it's definitely something I won't put off the table.
Oh, you know what just popped into my head? With the flash fiction that you wrote, do you know how many words it is off the top of your head?
I don't off the top of my head. I want to say it's under 2,000 words because I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be. So
Collective Visions. Have you heard of that?
yeah, I have.
They're having a drive for the short stories. You should submit yours.
Yeah, I definitely I haven't followed them in a while. It's been a quick minute, but I will definitely look into that because I forgot about them, to be honest.
No, yeah, they're actually great people. I talked to them. I think they were one of like my first 5 people that had the unfortunate
Oh.
mistake of coming on for the first time. No, no, God bless them. Uh, they came through. They were really awesome. I mean, like phenomenal. It was Elizabeth A Suggs and Jonathan Reddock, Reddick. I don't know, but the collective tales publishing is what they're doing, and they have like a drive. They basically knock out like a couple anthologies a year, and Collective Visions is like their sci-fi sect of one. They just dropped one called Collective Darkness, which is like a horror
Yeah,
anthology.
somebody tagged me on that one. I was like,
Oh, cool.
yeah. It's like
Didn't
I
know
don't
I.
write horror, but this is cool.
Now that's something, huh? Then again, that shows how much clout you have. That people are
Yeah,
just
I
tagging you
guess
into
so. They want
things.
me to write a horror book.
Yeah, they're like, "Yay, what's up?" Uh, man, that's really awesome, huh? So,
It is.
man, that is just well. One thing I have up here, I definitely want to show off is I have your website and as well as your book on here.
Oh, cool.
Let me share that. So this is Wings of Fate. There's that title. I mean, title. Here's the cover. That's a beautiful cover. So, how did you get into the choosing of this cover? Who made it for you?
I work with A to Z book cover designs. She is amazing. Her name's Esther. She did my covers for all 4 books. I haven't released the 4th cover yet, but it's coming next month. I'm pretty excited. Um, yeah, so I worked with her on all 4 and she's been incredible. She's really quick. She basically just listens to me. I write an email that says, hey, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I see in my head. And then she brings it to life. So that is how those were born. I just had an idea in my head and she made them real. And she's amazing.
That's phenomenal. Yeah, and beautiful covers too.
Thank you.
Have your website up here as well. Skye Horn. Make sure all the people, listening on, watching, make sure to give a quick shout out, give a quick click. That's a beautiful website too.
Thank you. I actually just updated it a couple months ago. So it's all brand new. My newsletter and everything too. It's all fun.
Oh man, I love the setup that you have here.
Thank you.
So definitely make sure to give this a quick checkout, and definitely make sure to, click that buy button on Amazon. Stop playing. Come on.
Or read it for free on Kindle Unlimited if you're a
Or
Kindle Unlimited person.
exactly. Got to make sure to support the indies, man. What we doing? Uh, so another thing that I just wanted to get into for a quick little thing is I usually always ask, what is your guilty pleasure as far as like movies and TV shows? I'll tell you mine is Tokyo Drift, the Fast and Furious movie. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. I can't even explain myself. There's something about that movie. I think it's a soundtrack or something.
It's a good movie. I don't think, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good movie. Those are all guilty pleasures for me. But
That's a good movie.
yeah, I think I already mentioned my guilty pleasure, and I probably, make myself look like a girl, but whatever. The Vampire Diaries has been my guilty pleasure since, high school. And it's one of those shows that
It's
I'll
still
go back
going?
and I'll rewatch. No,
Oh,
it's
okay.
just on Netflix now. Right? It's still going? No.
No,
It's just
because
one of those shows that I can go back and rewatch and kind of veg and not have to think about anything, which is kind of nice. So I like to just sit and watch that. And you know what's funny is that I feel like the character development in that show is really good. So when I'm stuck in my books, or I'm stuck like in that, not writer's block, because I don't really believe in writer's block, but
yeah,
where you just are tired and don't want to think about your book anymore.
that's really what it is.
I like to sit and watch that show because I feel like I can just fall into other characters and their drama and their lives and not have to deal with it. So that's my guilty pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% have to agree. And you know what? I love that you said that too, about like that, like admitting that's your guilty pleasure, but still being able to like derive some type of meaning, some type of lesson from that.
Right.
Man, that is beautiful. Because I'll be honest with you, when I watch Tokyo Drift, or like more like my version of a guilty pleasure, my brain is about as off as it can be. I'm just watching a movie. You know what I mean? I have a really bad like nick, like tack, whatever, tick. I don't know. I
Tick.
have a really tick. Is it called tick? Whatever. I have a really bad like knack for always like completely lose, especially if there's like good character development, like you said. I can lose myself in plots, especially when I'll hop on Reddit and like get like almost excited to like talk about like a movie or a TV show that I just watched, and people like, oh, what? There was a plot hole in this time and here and here and here, and I'm reading
Right.
it through. It's like, oh, you're right. How did I miss all that?
But
Because I
I
was
still
in the
loved it.
movie. Yeah, because I was there. You know what I mean? I wasn't even hearing
Yeah.
everything else. But what is funny, and I'm sure you've like seen it in other people's writing, especially in and like people's like comment section on Amazon. Isn't it so weird, the things that people get like enamored on and will like give a 2-star instead of like a 4-star over? Little things. There was one comment that I wrote. Wow, can you imagine that? It was a person talking about that they didn't like, that they felt that the character in the cover didn't match up to the character that as it was described, gave it a 2-star, but then ended the review saying how much they liked the book. It's like, dude,
Right.
what? What? What are you talking about, my dude? Why? Why do you
Yeah.
do such a thing?
People that write 2-star reviews or 1-star reviews too, they're just there to complain. They're not there because they want to support the author. And
100%.
I just take it as a grain of salt. If they're sitting there and like writing a 2-star review about my book, more power to them. If they need to do that for their day to get better, okay, like that's fine. I'm just going to focus on the positive. But yeah, I agree. People say the weirdest things that they're upset about. And it just makes me realize that not every book is for everybody. I like to go to my favorite books and read the 1 and 2-star reviews, because I'm like, what are you talking about? That's ridiculous. Like,
Oh my God. That's another great point. Isn't that the most heartbreaking thing ever? When like you think that there's like the best movie. All right. Cloud Atlas is another movie where I think it's just like one of the best things ever made. But then for whatever reason, when I like go on like and talk to like other people that are movie like buffs, quote unquote, and they'll tear apart that movie for like plot holes. And I'm just there like with a broken heart, my lollipop is like tilting to the side. I'm like, oh, I thought this was really good.
right.
Because it really is true. Not everything is for everyone. It really is like
Yeah.
an audience thing. But I have to say that even if it's not a book that I'm getting the review on, when I see that thing, I get a visceral emotion. And I just think of like, as you said, getting the Scooby-Doo gang together, right? All the author buddies, we mask up, we drive around to the commune. It's like, yo, we saw what you wrote yesterday. Egg the house.
I love that. Yeah, I agree. I mean, you just have to learn to laugh about it too and be okay with the fact
That's what
that,
it is.
somebody didn't like your book. Oh, well, like it just happened.
One of my favorites, the very first time I wrote anything that I published, I wrote a 300-word short story. Talk about flash fiction. And I put it up on Reddit. And I remember one of the comments, like, it was so funny. Like the guy started digging in, or girl, who knows who wrote it, but the person started digging in to like me. It was like, not only is this bad, but like you probably like hate your own life and blah blah blah. Just like running all this like personal stuff. And I remember I was like reading it, just like I'm laughing as I'm reading this. Like, how could you make
Right.
like such an assumption about me being like depressed and all this like XYZ? It's like, listen, like Dr. Seuss went through world wars and then wrote the most fantastical like kid
Yeah.
stories ever. You don't know where inspiration comes from. Know what I mean? I could be the happiest person ever, and then I turn that into like the most twisted, dark, horror story you ever
Yeah.
thought of. You don't know where any idea comes from. And the idea that like this person interjected so much personal stuff into it, it had me like dying. It was like I couldn't even take it seriously for a second, you know?
Exactly. That's good though. That you should approach all reviews like that.
Well, I guess is that like I read that and I knew that was fake, but then you read that one thing that has the hint of truth in it. And then that's
Yeah.
when it kills you. It's like, oh man, maybe that person's right. You're taking like the extra long shower, looking at the drain as the water goes down it. You're at the red light, taking way longer than you need to be, just looking out the window, like,
Yeah.
why am I even doing
I
this?
mean, those reviews happen too. Like I have one review on my first book that points out a sentence that was a really bad sentence. It was something like I was really repetitive in it. And I went back and I looked at it and I was like, yeah, that was a bad sentence. You're right.
Yeah, but a
But
sentence.
yeah, exactly. But they wrote a 2-star review for that one sentence. And I'm just like,
Bitch.
well, did you really need to take the time to do that for one sentence? Like, so like I said, but that's one of those reviews that you look at and you're like, okay, they were right, but did they have to say it like that? Like, come on.
I'm telling you. Well, it's I guess it's kind of the generation that we live in too.
Yeah.
Whereas like, these people, there's just a way different thing of like telling a person face to face something and then like typing it out. You know what I mean? You
Oh,
have
for
to have
sure.
a lot different ranges of emotion, and just like, seeing a person's like, the main thing is seeing a person's reaction. If you say something mean and you have to deal with a person like getting like sad about it, unless you're completely sociopathic and completely tied off, I think that's pretty hard to do. To say something
Yeah,
mean to a person and like have to like deal with the reaction, that's not nice. Like I don't think anybody likes to saying it or feel it. It's mutual. But if you take that
exactly.
away, then there's nothing there, and people can just say the most vile things for fun. It doesn't even have You don't even have to like go into like all like Freudian psychological about like they about how bad their day's going. They could have a great day and just feel like writing that because there's no
Yeah,
ramifications. You know what I mean?
exactly. Yeah, it's definitely our generation thing. It's something that, the next few generations are going to have to deal with too, which kind of sucks, but it yeah, I agree.
Man, what's another thing that just popped into my head, and honestly, it popped into my head for the dumbest reasons. Like as we were talking about generation, that song, "My Generation," dun, 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 dun. And it made me think, because as you were talking about like the lyrics and music and all that, what is your genre of music?
Oh, rock and roll, 100%.
Okay.
So that is what I grew up listening to. That's what I put on when I want to clear my head or
Like
whatever.
soft or hard?
Um, Harder rock and roll is more my favorite.
Hmm.
I was a huge Linkin Park fan growing up, so that's more
Okay.
like your alternative rock and roll.
Yeah.
But I also grew up listening to like Iron Maiden and AC/DC and the classics, or my classics. I don't know, maybe they're not classics anymore. but but yeah, so one of my favorite bands right now is the Pretty Reckless, and they're really hard rock and roll with a female lead, and she's got like the most unique voice, super incredible. But that's what I like to listen to. I know I don't look like somebody who would be into rock and roll, but that is just totally me.
Oh no, no, no. I've So I didn't even hear my first like rock song. like I think that's why college, you kind of like brought up like a great point. College is phenomenal just because it brings you around the energy of people that are into your type of stuff, right? And
Yeah.
not only is it like interesting because they're interested in your, like you have similar interests, but they come from completely different backgrounds. So I came from where I came from, and then my friends came from where they came from. So when they would talk to me about their songs that, like, like everyone knew off the top of their head, and like, they'd be at a party and it would come on and everybody starts singing along to it. And I'm in the corner, like, I've never heard the song once in my life. It
Yeah.
was like, it was all to them. It was like, the Blink 182 and like Linkin Park and all that stuff. I never heard any of that growing up. It was all rap to me.
Hmm.
That was all on the radio. That's what my friends listened to. That's all it was. When I moved down to Miami, I got really into EDM. So like in a year, I went
Yep.
from that to like going to dun, 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 like, and I think that, which is the whole reason I brought it up, had a huge effect on my writing. Because I think when you're like kind of when you're into music, I think that type of stuff bleeds into your writing. No?
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
How do you think it kind of bleeds into yours?
Well, it definitely takes a darker turn for mine.
Interesting.
But I have like playlists made for different moods in my stories, which it
Interesting.
helps. So I've got, like the heartbreak playlist where my character is depressed and upset and their lover is, being a dick, whatever. So I've got those, and I have the growing up playlist, the ones it's like the motivational, that you can do this, that type of thing. So I have them all separated. And that really helps me because if I am in a spot where I don't know what my character is supposed to be feeling, then I know that I get that way too. Like in real life, if I don't, I'm struggling, I'm upset and I don't really know why I'm upset, but I'm upset. And I turn music on and then suddenly I understand exactly why I'm upset because those lyrics hit me in such a way that I'm like, wow, okay, that's what I was upset about that whole time. So it works the same way with my characters. I'll put on a playlist and then suddenly a song will come on and I'll be like, wow, okay, so that's what they're upset about, or that's what they, are thinking of. And suddenly I can write a whole scene just based on that one little lyric that came through and, reminded me what my character was feeling. So I like to have music. I can't write with music on,
Yeah,
but I like to
no.
listen to music in between my writing.
Now that's interesting.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a cool exercise.
Well, especially with like the fairy and whatnot, I feel like that would give you like great like like space to be able to write like little like nursery rhymes or like little like lyrics that would kind of go into however you want to like do it. Do you ever get to like flex that within your books and like write little like stanzas or write little poems or anything like that?
For the first time, I did that in my fourth book, actually. It has
Uh,
a ballad in it. Kind of like a sea shanty kind of feel because obviously those became a thing in the last like year.
yeah.
So it has like that type of sea shanty feel. And one of my critique partners actually recorded it for me because she's a musician too. And she did like a little riff of it, and I now have it for a promotion, and I'm super excited because I'm going to use it when I release my cover and kind of announce my pre-order and everything for the fourth book. So
That's
I'm
awesome.
super excited to use that. I'm really glad I wrote it. I shared it on Instagram just for some feedback, so it's up there. But yeah, I was terrified of doing it, and then I just finally was like, I'm gonna do it. I need a lyric in here, so it's there and it's perfect. I love it.
Man, that's awesome because I mean, if you haven't, I'm a huge like TV and like movie buff, right? And one thing that I'm really noticing now is how much music really pushes a scene and really pushes like, or just a theme music. Like one of my top favorite shows ever in life, Breaking Bad. If
Mhm.
I hear that dun dun down down, I'm telling, my head is there. I'm cooking meth. I'm there. I'm right there. Like I'm in Albuquerque. I'm squashing out bugs. I'm getting some pollo loco. I'm right there. I'm completely in that universe. Or if I'm watching Peaky Blinders and you hear that like Red Hand song or like anything like that. I love things that just snap your head into it. Know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
think you're gonna that beautiful marketing for that. Just having, especially a sea chanty, because I just actually watch Parts of the Caribbean, so I have like that yo
Yes.
ho in my head hardcore right now.
Yeah, the recording my friend did for me, it literally reminds me of that the third Pirates of the Caribbean where the little boy is
Yes.
singing. It's got like that
Yes.
vibe to it. Oh my God, it's so good. I
Oh,
love
the
it.
jealousy. Oh, the
He's so
jealousy.
talented.
Yeah, and I love that, especially like how it builds up into that third movie too.
Yeah,
Because it's a rebellion song, you know what I mean?
for sure.
Oh God, I mean, I just love rebellion songs. There's something about like, uh, uh, it really like there's something really romantic about rebellion. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like
Yeah.
I normally don't like to talk about current events. I usually keep it all, purely fictional. Uh, but what's happening in Miramar right now with the military coup and the resistance to that? Have you seen
Yeah.
that people are doing the three finger
Oh
sign
no, I hadn't seen
from
that.
Hunger Games?
I recognize the side. I just didn't know that they were
What?
doing that.
Can
That's
you
crazy.
imagine that this is real?
Yeah,
People
that's crazy.
right now are doing that, and their reasoning for is because their three fingers represent the three demands that they are seeking from their government.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, like it's unreal how things like tie up to that, and also with the whole music thing. The in Hunger Games when they have the
The song.
yeah, you know what song I'm talking about. You know damn well. I'm sorry.
The Hanging Tree song.
Oh my God, breaks your heart. And
Yeah,
then when you actually read like the scene from that, and it's like Katniss breaking down like how that goes, and how when she was younger she thought that the song was like an uplifting song, but when she got older and was able to diagnose the lyrics more, she realized it was about death, and
right.
like how everything that to me is one of the most like, significant examples of what music can do within literature. Know what I mean?
For sure.
Because like there's always the great examples that I showed about theme songs in TV shows or like really good movies that have like like soundtracks that really like get you through, like Tokyo Drift, right? But there's something to be said when you can incorporate it in literature. Like Lemony Snicket did the same thing in Series Unfortunate Events. Like it's I love when really musical people can really tie that into like literature, and to hear that you're doing it, it's like phenomenal,
It
phenomenal,
was
phenomenal.
scary, but I did it.
Well, to close off, definitely approaching that time. Thank you so much for everything we've done so far.
Thanks for
But
having me.
oh, but one thing that I just gotta ask is, how do you feel about the latest Star Wars stuff, like the recent three movies? Rogue One, since you did seem to have like you made like a face shift when I mentioned it, and the Mandalorian. How do you think those are faring? How do you feel about those?
Rogue One, I loved. That's actually one of my favorite Star Wars movies.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
think it was brilliant. And
Yeah.
it was, the character development again, having a bittersweet ending. Just the whole movie was amazing. I don't have a single bad thing to say about it. The Mandalorian, I loved season one, and season two, I struggled through. The ending was fantastic. I loved the ending, but I felt like it dragged through season two. So I was having a hard time. But I didn't dislike it. I mean, I watched it every week and I, did it. I really loved season one though. And I thought that it's cool how they, do the Western cowboy thing with the space and the Mandalorian.
Perfectly.
And that is really, really cool for me. It's just like Space Pirates is really cool. Space
Yeah,
Cowboys
for
is
sure.
also really cool.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I loved Rogue One. I liked Mandalorian, and I'm excited for whatever the new shows that are coming out. Obi-Wan, I'm really excited for,
Is it only one
especially
show?
because yes, you didn't know Obi-Wan and Anakin. Well, Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor are both coming back for the Obi-Wan show.
Oh,
So I'm
really?
freaking stoked.
Anakin's coming back? My God.
Yes.
All right,
So
cool.
yeah, I'm excited about that. And then there's also another show, Andor, that's coming out, which is about the what's his name? The guy from Rogue One.
Poe. No.
No, Poe's in the new ones.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was
Man,
gonna say the same thing.
damn, I love Poe though. Best
Yeah,
character easily in that whole franchise. Well, him and I can't remember Finn.
yeah. I wish they would have done more with Finn though. I feel like he could have been so much more than he actually was. Um,
So much
but
more.
yeah, I don't remember what guy's name is, but Andor is coming out too, and that's based on the guy from Rogue One. And
The reason I said Poe is I'm pretty sure Poe was that dude's father. I think.
that's possible. I'm not 100% sure, but that's possible.
Well, I'm remembering like a Reddit comment. which I really shouldn't be basing fact on that.
Facts on.
Now that I think about it, but
We did talk about how you could say anything on the internet.
hey, listen, the moment I finish here, I'm gonna say a whole bunch of stuff. I'm gonna say it as fact, and no one's gonna. Well, there's gonna be at least 4 or 5 people to say contrary, but I'm gonna stick to my gums. But how you feel about the 3 new movies?
I was slightly disappointed. I liked the concept of it. I thought that, I love Kylo. Kylo is my favorite character, actually, when I pick one out of all the movies. And I liked Poe as well because I thought his wit was fun. But Kylo had so much potential. And then I was just mad that she was Palpatine's daughter. I was like, that was such a,
What
spoiler alert, my bad. That was such a, it could have been better. I don't know. There was just so much more they could have done. And I loved that they were going to have the female Jedi lead. And then, yeah, I was just like, I don't know.
And they had the ball, they had this whole thing of her parentage. And then she ends up being like, oh, she's nobody. And I'm like, yes, that could have been it. Be nobody. But then it had to be a Palpatine thing. The only reason that I agreed with it is that I really liked the end. When it was like that she finally got the connection, and it was like that whole feeling of
tragedy.
Like we're with you. My heart was actually right there. I was like, oh my God, yes. And I felt that I should really like that ending. But even then, you could have had that without her being Palpatine's daughter. She could have been nobody.
She didn't need to be Palpatine's daughter.
At all. So
Palpatine didn't even need to be in it. We could have just had Snoke be the bad guy the entire way through.
I don't know. It's one of those things that it breaks your heart because for a fact that was an executive that made that. That wasn't hopefully that wasn't the writer that actually painstakingly went through the whole mythos and try to develop a coherent plot throughout the stories. I think that was just one all right, we need something to happen in this movie.
Yeah. They switched directors so much, and that everything changed out. So I feel like they probably didn't have a consistent plot throughout all 3 movies.
Yeah, I actually just recently watched a YouTube video of somebody going on, and you actually made a great point. And I guess the actors actually really felt it, and they actually made it kind of a little racial too. That they were saying that all the nuances of the characters were given to Raya and Kylo, but then everybody else, Poe was in Spanish. I can't remember, Ashley something Tran, the woman that played Rose.
Yeah, the girl.
And Finn, all the ethnic people that were on the cast that were promised, and somebody made a point that literally they were on the poster. If you look at the poster for the first poster, Finn was holding a lightsaber opposite of Kylo. So they plotted it this was gonna be first Force user that's African American, that's not Samuel L. Jackson. It was finally gonna that wasn't using a purple
lightsaber.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It was gonna be something. And on top of that, a turned stormtrooper. I mean, they had it.
Yeah,
it breaks your heart.
It was in their court. They just didn't do it.
They had it. And I have to tell you, is especially with because one of the things that I love the most about Star Wars is that to me, from what I've known about what I've read about the expanded universe, is that the Force, as what we've been shown, is nothing compared to what it is.
Right.
What people can do with that at high levels is nothing compared. Like Palpatine did that life suck to a couple people. There was one dude, I can't remember his name, that did it to a planet over, that took the life out of the entire planet, and then found it was immortal for years, and he centuries. Know what I mean? That is some crazy shit that we just never seen. And it goes both ways. The highest they've seen is Yoda, things like that. So I like that they got into that whole dyad aspect of Kylo and Ren, that they were 2 sides of the Force.
Yeah, I liked that too.
And I mean the cinematography too, of them talking to one another, that they were always right there.
And that fight scene with them was really good too, where they're the 2 with the red guards. Oh my God. That was a great fight scene.
That she passes off the lightsaber and he grabs it from. They had it. So
yeah, they just missed it with the plot holes.
So all right, so to end it, I a little thought experiment. Where would you have taken it? So they just taken off the latest director. You've now just been giving the helm of a $5 billion industry. What are you gonna do? And in the middle of these movies, so you can pick at any point to restart. Where would you have gone different?
Oh my God, that's so hard. Put me on the spot. Um, well, she definitely would have been a nobody because I think that would have been a way cooler story
Without a
to
doubt.
have her like be so enthralled with finding her family and then to find out she actually is a nobody. Like you are just gifted, just let it be gifted.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't have, yeah, Palpatine wouldn't have been there. But Snoke probably would have just stayed throughout the whole movie. And then I would have had Kylo go against Snoke and not kill Han Solo. Like, why do we need to kill Han Solo? That was just a dumb, like, I get it, father son thing, but he could have died in such a better way than just walking up to the lightsaber to be stabbed. Like, he was like, okay, you can stab me now. Like, that's okay.
There's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So I know that one is kind of controversial, but yeah, I would have had her be nobody and then find herself in the Force. And I would have had Leia train her. That would have been so cool to see Leia train her because Leia was trained as a Jedi in between the movies. She just chose not to be because she wanted to have kids and wanted to get married. So she trained her a little bit toward the end, but if Leia had trained her, I feel like she would have not had the pride that Luke has and the kind of arrogance that Luke has. And it would have been a balance. And that would have been cool to see the difference. And then Finn would have had a way bigger role because he was such a cool character. I don't get why they left him in the dust. If he would have had a lightsaber, I would have been so much more happy. I don't know.
Would you have made him Force sensitive, or would you have made him full Jedi?
Full Jedi. You can't just give him Force sensitive. That's not nice.
That's what I'm saying.
They're like, here's a little hint, and you can maybe have a little bit of Force, but you can't have it all. Not allowed.
Man, because if I can be honest, especially when I watched like the first movie, I didn't think that Ren was actually going to be the highlight at all. I thought it was going to be Finn. Like I thought they were going to have like I thought the dyad thing was going to happen in between them. But I guess that's one of the a couple times that like delayed or like opposite of like expectation is actually kind of cool.
Yeah.
Because you immediately think that Finn and Rey are going to end up together, but then they don't.
I liked that. Yeah, I liked that they didn't end up together because I thought that was, and I liked the dyad between Rey and Kylo.
Yeah,
I thought they matched really well. But I think that Finn should have had a bigger part in that, even if he wasn't like a main character, like the protagonist. I think he should have had more impact on her character arc, whereas he didn't. He was with her from the beginning, and he didn't really change her the way that I think he could have. Like he could have made her a better character by, showing her this side of the stormtroopers, or not stormtroopers, the Empire, and showing her like, this is how I grew up and this is how I've changed. And she could have changed in that way too and mirrored it. And I think that would have been really cool.
Man, you know what? And I think that would have made like everything better because then the whole ending of like her destroying the Jedi, spoiler alert, would have made a lot more sense if she was more with Finn and got to see that, like, all right, maybe both sides are a little more.
Both sides are bad.
Yeah, both sides are bad. Man,
they had it in their court. They didn't do it.
Now they know. Next time they need to call up Skyhorn. Like, yo, listen, we heard what you were doing with the Wings of Fate, Wings of Faerie, Kingdom of Fairies. We need it. We need it for Star Wars. Well,
no, they can't have it. They can't. Star Wars cannot have my story.
Well, it definitely can fit inside of it somehow. It's unreal.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure it does.
No, I'm telling you because I'm waiting. I'm waiting for it. I'm waiting for somebody to hit me with a YouTube video, be like, "Oh, Allegor of the End is straight rip off of Episode 9 by here, right. here." I'm waiting for it. I know it's around the corner.
Take it as a compliment.
That's all you can. That's all you can. Well. It's been a complete honor having you on. Do you have any final thoughts?
Good luck with your book publishing. That's so exciting. I'm really happy to have been here, and I can't wait to see what you do with your book. It sounds interesting, and I'm excited for that graphic novel too.
It's going to be a lot of work, but I'm excited for it too.
You got this.
Well, again, for the people listening on, where can people find you?
So you can find me on Instagram. It's Skye, Skye, Horn _author. Or you could find me on my website, which is just skyhorn.com. You can find my books on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Book Depository, Kindle Unlimited. And yeah, I've got signed copies on my website as well, and a free prequel in my newsletter. If you don't want to buy the book yet and kind of just want to see my style, you can get a free prequel to the series and see if it's something you like.
And I'm telling you, I couldn't recommend doing everything and above plus more for this amazingly talented author. I'm telling you, everything that I've seen so far has been blowing me away. What I've read of the first book of Wings of Fate has been phenomenal. It's actually kind of funny. Everything that we talked about in the beginning of like that whole little of your trip to Ireland, that's the beginning of chapter 1, Homegirl getting off the book, and then there's the boy and the girl, no, the boy and his mom that they have a little interaction with. So I'm telling you, it is well worth the read, well worth the buy. Amazon.com, Kindle, Skyhorn, pick up the whole discography, I mean bibliography. And again, you already heard everything that she has to say about the promo for Wings of, I was about to say Redemption again.
Insurgence.
I was about to say Redemption again. I'm telling you.
It was almost
it's a
Redemption.
problem.
You were close.
So stay tuned for it. I am phenomenally blessed to have spoken to with this author. And thank you again, truly, for the bottom of my heart.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And I cannot wait to have you again, hopefully in a year. You know, maybe you'll have another 8 books out in a year. Who knows? Who knows with the
Maybe.
with how you're going? If anything, I'm lowballing it.
You're doing great.
No, I mean like lowballing it for you. Like I'm saying, it's probably gonna be 12.
Don't set the bar so high.
Well, again, this is the end of the podcast. AR's Tales, aka the A.R.T podcast. I am A.R. Mirabal, the Skye Horn. Thank you very much, and I will be back to you next Monday. Peace out.